Well, welcome back. We are into the home stretch here on a three-day, symposium here at the CDOIQ. So well done for those of you who've made it all the way through. One of the major themes that always comes up at the symposium is the theme around culture and driving change in the culture of the organizations. And at the end of the day, culture is the way we do things around here. And we know that culture can eat strategy for breakfast. It's really important, turns out, and CDOs really need to focus on it. So here to help us a little bit more down, exploring good ways of doing this from a data and analytics empowerment perspective is Rachini. And Rachini will introduce herself, and I'd like to just hand over the reins to you right now.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Derek, for having me. And thank you again to everybody who made it through to the very last hour of a wonderful 3 days that we've all shared together. My name is Rachini Moosavi. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer at UNC Health, and I'm going to pull up. All right. Well, thank you all again for having me. So I'm going to be talking to you about empowerment and how empowerment drives culture change. So as the Chief Analytics Officer at UNC Health, we've been talking about culture and empowerment for many, many years, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit about our story. So I'm going to get started by actually diving into what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about all these great things, transformation and how cultural transformation happens, some of the tactics that we've taken, how we've built a community and measuring progress against that, as well as delivering value. So just making sure you all know exactly what session you're going to be joining for. I need to put this little disclaimer out here based on what my healthcare system asked us to do. So I just want you to know that these views represent my point of view and not that of UNC Health. And let me tell you a little bit about my health system. So I've worked for UNC Health for coming up on nearly 17 years. And it's not been nearly as long as 1952 when we first opened our very first single hospital, and it was just 78 beds back then with 108 employees, and boy, have we grown pretty significantly since that time. The one thing that I like to say and remind people, though, is that no matter how big we've gotten, the UNC Health mission has always been the same, that we are here to serve the health and well-being of all North Carolinians. And that's a big part of who we are and what our mission is in taking care of our folks and all the people throughout our state. So from 108 employees back then to now having over 43,000 teammates across all of UNC Health, we've become quite a big system. It's about 16 hospitals spread across 20 hospital locations across the state of North Carolina, really trying to tap into all the different kinds of patients that we have across our state. We've actually got the second largest rural health population in the United States, behind Texas. So it's a lot of different varying kinds of needs that we're serving across our state. And in order to do that, one of the big things that we've invested in is analytics. And I'm proud to say that we have accomplished quite a lot when it comes to the standards of measure for healthcare analytics and healthcare IT. HIMSS, which is our Health Information Management Organization, has their stages of how you can think about healthcare analytics and what that should look like. So stage 7 is the highest that you can get, and UNC Health was the second in the nation to actually get that stage 7 designation, as well as the first in the world to be certified with a 777. So 3 different certifications that HIMSS offered. And we're really, truly proud of that. And we accredit it back to the fact that we've got an entire community across our entire health system of 40,000 plus people who really believe in curiosity answered through data and making decisions through that data and the information that we provide. But we're not done. Just as all of you know, the journey of a CDO is never ending. As soon as you think you've tackled one thing, it moves on to the next. And there's more and more unlimited demand for data and analytics that we're all seeing. And we try and make sure that when we address that demand, that we're really thinking and anchoring around that Gartner perspective of run, grow, and transform your business. So there's tons of work to do. We're also looking at the many initiatives that are helping us to advance the use cases for data and analytics techniques. And we're thinking about our people. So how can we really help to grow and upskill the wide community we have across our health system? And we'll talk about what I mean by community, our analytics community, in just a few minutes. And at the end of the day, healthcare is evolving. It's one of those things where, you know, healthcare is always kind of joked as if we're about 10 years behind when it comes to the adoption of data and analytics. However, if we don't advance, if we don't pursue some of these things, then we are going to get left behind. So there's a lot more work to be done. And as you all probably grasped during the pandemic, the quote that everybody said often and frequently was to never waste a crisis. And, you know, when it comes to crises, that it's a great way for you to take the opportunity to figure out how you can advance things like your data and analytics mission and grow those capabilities across your systems and your organizations. For UNC Health, I can count at least 4 or 5 different crises that have helped us to springboard our data and analytics culture throughout our entire organization. One of the first was when we went live with our first electronic health record system. One of the seconds when we grew from being more than just 2 hospitals to being the size that we are now. And we needed to act more like a cohesive system and take care of our data and our information in a way that it could make us more competitive. The third is the one that I'm going to talk about in just a minute that actually helped us to build on our community. And then, you know, the COVID pandemic, while it was a horrific event for the entire world, it really helped to push adoption of understanding how to consume data to really run your business during that time. And so that was a crisis that really helped us to get to where we need to as well. And obviously right now with generative AI and the ease of availability and everything that comes with it, that's another new, it's not necessarily a crisis, but it's an opportunity that's helping us to drive what we need to within the data and analytics space. So let's start with that third one that I mentioned that I'd get into that helped us with springboarding our community and thinking about enablement. So back in the fall of 2019, one of the things that came out from one of our C-level executives was that while we were doing a lot of good things in data and analytics, and while we were getting awards for what we were doing, that the people, the leaders, the people who were trying to engage in data and analytics didn't quite feel like they were still connected enough to be able to be successful in their either their own team's needs to build out those data and analytics capabilities, or in their ability to leverage the great tools and assets that were already out there. And so what that led to was an analytics discovery that one of our C-level executives kicked off. And he kicked it off by taking our chief information officer, our chief analytics officer at the time, and having them do over 30 interviews with different leaders as well as analytics folks throughout the system to try and get a better understanding of what the needs were. From there, they also drove a survey that was sent out to over 1,800 people in our organization, and we had over 100 responses to it that helped to further emphasize what we needed to understand. And we took that information and further drove it through town halls and other conversations that really helped to formalize what we thought the needs were, the opportunities were to empower our analytics community. And those 4 themes that came out of it were enablement, learning community, organizational structure in HR, and governance. And this really became one of the first cohesive data and analytics strategies that we had to try and move the needle and enhance the way that we were going to operate as a one system approach to really thinking about enablement. And I'm going to dive into these as we go in just a little bit, but just to give you a high level understanding, enablement, as you all know, is how do we help people self-serve? How do we give them the right tools at the right time with the right resources and the right knowledge and capabilities to be able to do so? A community, this learning community, is how do you take people out of their silos and help them feel like they're integrated and part of something bigger that can serve this greater mission of analytics throughout a big organization? And how do we share that knowledge and create reusability, as well as get the most out of what we're trying to accomplish in driving value through the system? Or structure in HR, or the positions, are there ladders, are there ways for folks to feel like they can be promoted and they can drive their capabilities through their advancement through our organization? And then governance, how do we know we're working on the right things? How do we ensure that the business needs, the clinical needs are being thought of in the right way, so we have the right oversight and the right opportunities to make investments in the data and analytics space? So with those 4 themes, we're going to talk about the different tactics that we took to get there, as well as how we measured that at the end of this talk. But before I get into that, I want to make sure that we can help you understand a little bit more on what we mean by the analytics community, and what this opportunity, this crisis that we were met with, that allowed us to poll our stakeholders and get a better sense of what their needs were, led to us investing in more of that hub and spoke model that was so critical for our success. So I'm going to start by saying 1 + 1 = 3, and you're probably going to say to yourself, what does that even mean? How does that math even make sense? Aren't you in data? But sometimes 1 + 1 can equal 3. So I like to bake, and one of my favorite things that I like to bake is chocolate bread pudding. And when you think about the different parts and pieces, croissants are delicious by themselves. Chocolate chips are delicious by themselves. So when you pull them together, they make this amazing combination that even outpaces the individual parts that get there. And so we really can enhance what we're trying to do when you can take those great individual products and get this crazy equation of 1 + 1 = 3 to work. It springboards what you're trying to do in your organization in a way that you're getting more for the same amount of people, the same amount of potential that you could have had. And that's what we did with our analytics community. We took all these individual people and helped them to become part of a whole that became something bigger. So the term that we like to use at UNC Health is a hybrid community model. We're not decentralized, we're not centralized, we have a hybrid community model. That's often also referred to as a center of excellence or a hub and spoke model for data and analytics. And when it comes to our hybrid community model, we really needed to think about, well, what is our centralized organization going to offer? And the term ISDE stands for Information Services Division, which is where our centralized analytics office is housed. And EADS is our Enterprise Analytics and Data Services team. And all of those centralized capabilities, the data warehouse, data governance, data science, our reporting, ad hoc reporting kind of capabilities, as well as visualization skills. What are the services we're providing? What are the tools, the technology, the capabilities that we're driving? And how do we complement that by investing in analysts and analytics teams that are still embedded in the community back in the areas like pharmacy and revenue cycle and some of the care areas like surgeries. When you think about this hybrid community model, excuse me, it really enables you to one, make a decision that's what you're doing as an organization, but then start to think about the investment that actually makes that hybrid community model work. So I mentioned that we have capabilities like data and data warehouse and governance and all of that. One of the first things we did when we brought our group together was to say, let's create our own mission, let's create our own vision and clearly articulate what services does the central office provide. And for ISDEs, what we really came up with is that we wanted to seek to build a place where world-class healthcare is naturally driven by insights. And that's because we wanted the care, the services that we provide to really add that value back to our organization. And the services that we're providing, as they're shown here, really are meant to be what really needs to be centralized that adds the greatest value across the system, that will even fill the gaps when there isn't necessarily that community talent to fill it. So these are just some of the things that we do, the broader categories of some of the things that we do in central analytics. But we also wanted to leverage our broader healthcare system and all the great talent that was spread across it. So one of the things that we've done is to really say, okay, if we're going to build this place where world-class healthcare is driven by insights, then we really also need to think about how we're going to enable the talent and the skills and the folks that are embedded in those decentralized areas in a way that they can add to the whole in a more meaningful way. And that investment really helped us to also start to think about the untapped potential of those different individuals as well as the teams that are spread across our health system. And so we really wanted to help augment and think about the fact that our community really is the greatest area where we can drive that top line growth and bottom line reductions in cost and everything else. But there's an engagement maturity model that we needed to be able to think about for every single one of those teams to assess where they are, how they're going to engage, how they can grow, and their maturity, as well as the opportunities that they can add. So if you think about the assessment of each of those areas, things like marketing's just getting started, but pharmacy analytics has been doing this for a long time, and they have a rich data warehouse that's housed in our centralized space that they have built a bunch of dashboards off of. And how do you think about the evolution of those teams and the growth and the value that they're adding? So if we dive a little bit further into the pharmacy analytics piece of that, you can start to see how we're building upon those layers. So the pharmacy analytics team has their own structure of the analysts who are pharmacists and the analysts that are non-pharmacists in their background, and the different data sources that they are picking up on that leads to the different analytics tools that they're driving. But in having this team that is co-located and part of the overall pharmacy department, they're able to be a part of the learnings and the evolution of the needs within that pharmacy group. And then they're also able to not only have that subject matter expertise because they're housed there, but they're also able to then be a liaison back to centralized analytics to ensure that the data warehouse capabilities that we're building out match the definitions that they need, that they can provide those data governance stewardship type roles and support back to the system, and that they're helping to build upon the assets that get used across our system. And, I said that this was one of our more mature kind of departments, one of our more mature teams. And they've had some big wins in the past. They've been able to save the organization lots of money. They've been able to really do some safety type things around controlled substances, and they've had wins by using data and analytics. And so they're almost like a poster of the value that can be added by investing back in a community analytics team. And at the end of the day, that's what we're really going for. We can have a fantastic strategy and a roadmap for what we're trying to do with data and analytics, but it really has to equate and add back to that patient value, which is the mission of UNC Health, to add value to what we're trying to accomplish for our community of patients. And our three-part strategic themes that we really aimed at to get there were around liberating the data, making better decisions, and accelerating transformation, all of which get centralized around the different capabilities that we're trying to drive for the system. And in our analytics community, we're really unable to do all of that centrally. So another way of thinking about this is that all of that never-ending list of analytics demand can't just be served by a centralized group. So we have to leverage our analytics community to really help us to address the needs, to build the assets, to ensure that the right understanding is happening around each of those capabilities. And so that's where we're getting the valuable insights right back to the areas where it needs to happen, in the strategic spaces, in the care redesign spaces, and operational efficiency, and all the different capabilities that are required in order to truly drive both organizational value as well as patient value. For some of you who kindly took the poll right before this session, I'd asked the question of, when you think of data and analytics enablement, what's the one word that comes to mind? And as you can see, there's some really great answers in here. The 2025 is interesting. I'd love to understand more of what somebody was thinking with that one, but empowerment really stood out as the biggest concept that comes out. Now, hype is also interesting. I mean, you can think about that in terms of a positive and a negative, but these are really great words that you've thrown out here. But I'm gonna really focus on the empowerment aspect that came through in this poll as we start to shift into tactics. So how do you really get into those enablement tactics? UNC Health, when we went through that survey and we found out that there were 4 areas that we had to really dive into, we started to align back not just the strategy, but the tactics that needed to go with it. So we decided on some key areas that we would focus on. The first was a community forum, and using the analytics community, which we call TAC, we did some branding around that, and we created TAC Talks. So TAC Talks really are just those sessions that happen twice a month, where we can bring our community together, celebrate some successes that's happening locally, where we can talk about the what's new, what's coming, what are things we need to be prepared for. We can do some education, we can do some celebration, we can just bring all the folks across the system that are spread out in varying roles. Some of them are analytics professionals, some of them are just analytics and data enthusiasts, and they just want to be part of the conversation. But we can bring them into these forums to be able to share and be part of that conversation. The next set of tactics were really more around tools and platforms. So we really wanted to make sure that when we give our community the right tools to be able to get their jobs done, when we make sure that, we roll out a new data warehouse that has SQL capabilities in it, that our folks know how to use it well, and that if you're growing skills like in Tableau, that you can phone a friend, ask a question. And so setting up user group forums that help to address that was a key part of our strategy for enablement when it came to the tools and platforms. Now, those groups meet on a fairly regular basis as well, at least monthly. They also have their own Teams channel thread where they can ask questions of each other and be almost like a support group to fulfill their mission in a speedy, fast, and productive way. And then the third angle of what we did with our community on the tactics that we employed was really thinking about training and support. So we have our TAC intranet site where we centralize all the information in terms of what's your one-stop shop in order to be successful in either using, consuming, or developing data and analytics. And so that TAC intranet site is a great resource that we can point folks to take advantage of it. We've also, since some of these slides were put together, we've recently released a TAC orientation that onboards anybody who comes into our health system who has an analytics type position, where we can now help them to understand the best ways to get involved with the analytics community. And then for folks who need more of that at the elbow support, TAC consults can be signed up for just like any other service request, and you can get assigned to an expert for a 1-hour session where you can dive into the questions that you've got, either on a data set, on the technology, on the capability that you're trying to drive. And probably one of our biggest wins was a simple one. It was starting a Teams channel where we have over 400 data and analytics enthusiasts and professionals across our system, over 400 folks who are engaged in a conversation. It's like their immediate phone a friend. We can see responses to questions on what data set would I use for XYZ, or how do I make something happen, or can someone get on the phone with me about this? And you see responses within minutes so that they feel like they're supported, and it really starts to break down that feeling of silos. So these tactics that we've taken in our analytics community have been incredibly effective for us, and we get a lot of great comments all the time. But we also have to think about the leadership. So once you start to really invest in an analytics community, you start to see teams that are formed. And those teams need leaders as well. So we invested back in the analytics leadership over those teams to ensure that they also were not in a silo, that they didn't have to figure it out for themselves. And that we could help grow the overall community of analysts, so without it needing to be locally done. So one of the first things, and this aligned back to the HR and org chart part of it, was that I sat down and I developed career tracks. We have a business analysis track that allows folks who are going to be answering more of the descriptive and diagnostic questions and get even pro formas created to have their own pathway to dive into those business questions. And then we built another track for our more technical folks, the data and analytics developer track, that helps them to grow from entry level, where we can bring in brand new talent and grow them internally, all the way through to some of our more talented, more skilled developers who have a direct liaison relationship back to our centralized analytics group in needs. The second big thing that we did with the analytics leadership side is bring them into a conversation. So we host them for two different types of meetings. One is a true governance type meeting. The other is more informal. And we call the governance meeting task planning. And this group helps us to think about what is it that we need to continuously support the community of analytics users and across our system, and how can we really champion enablership? And if we need to switch gears and go a different direction, how can we do that? Who can we rely on? And that really, by bringing those leaders to the table and bringing them together, it allows us to leverage the greater strength and power across our system of the different folks who want to help move the needle in terms of engagement. And the second part of that was recruitment. So as all of you have probably seen over this last year, we've ebbed and flowed in terms of the availability of analytics talent. And so the recruitment piece alone became a struggle. Because we had started by creating these career tracks, we were able to invite all the leaders who were using those same analytics positions to the table, so that we could engage each other in a better and a more coordinated recruitment effort. And that really helped us to bring in some of the best talent to those teams, so that they could get them engaged to really drive our healthcare system's values and mission. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on from a leadership support perspective is that, it's not enough for us to sit in what some folks might call the ivory tower, which is shared services, and tell people this is available to you, go use it. So we got in our cars and we traveled across the state to all of our hospitals. And engage the leadership teams at each of those entities to really help them understand what is available from our offerings across all of the different community analytics capabilities, as well as our centralized analytics capabilities. And we engaged them in conversation. We provided some training. We did some office hours and really helped those local leaders to get better engaged with being their own champions for data and analytics. And those roadshows will continue and have continued since the first effort that we went out and did that. And that's really helped to really engage and move the needle as well. So it's one thing for me to say, I think we're doing a great job. As the leader over that group, I'm always going to tell my team how wonderful they are, but we also need to measure the progress of how well we're doing. So what we did was to go back to that analytics discovery and say, okay, for those 4 buckets, what are the things that we've actually done for every single one of those spaces to move the needle? And have we checked the box on getting far enough along to accomplish something within those spaces? So for a lot of the things that I've just mentioned to you, that are the tactics that we employed, they fit into one of these buckets, into one of those bullets down at the bottom. And within that time frame, by March of 2022, these were the things that we had inventoried that we had accomplished, that we felt like met the need or helped to move the needle for any one of those 4 areas of opportunity that were identified. But then we also used a survey to gather feedback directly from our community, again, tapping that broader scale of folks, asking them to give us responses to how we've done. And we asked them just a few questions, but they were really impactful to help us understand that we were making a difference, that we still are making a difference. So overall satisfaction, we had aimed to be at a 3.8, and that if we were really going to stretch, we'd be at a 3.9 for overall satisfaction. And we were pleasantly surprised that on a 5-point scale, that overall satisfaction was at a 4. So we actually blew that out of the water in terms of our ability to, in just that short time from 2019 to March of 2022, that we were able to really help move the needle in terms of how folks felt about our program for the analytics community. And then for those of you who are familiar with a Net Promoter Score, we delivered and asked the question of the Net Promoter Score back in 2019, and we did the same thing again in 2022. And what we found is that we had moved into the great range, which is fantastic to see that kind of progress in a short time. And that our brand recognition, the concept of TAC, was becoming recognizable. It was something that folks felt that they were increasingly more aware of. In fact, 45% more aware of than they were than from the previous survey. So really great progress was being made in terms of how we were enabling our community and how we were trying to ensure that we can continue to see progress in that space. And it doesn't stop there. So as you can see, this is March of 2022, and we're now well over a year since then. So we're gonna resurvey the same community. We're gonna do it every 2 years moving forward. So we'll gather that same kind of input and ensure that we continue to build upon the brand, that we continue to build upon the offerings, doing things like TAC orientation, as well as other offerings that have come out since then to ensure that the enablement continues. But we also wanted to make sure that it wasn't enough that we were reaching the people that are doing the work, that are excited about the work, but that our senior leadership was also showing us signs of adoption of analytics. And we're feeling that. So from an anecdotal perspective, we are getting far more requests for predictive analytics, for AI, for there to be reporting, for leaders to drive their meetings based on KPIs and reporting and analytics. And so they're becoming more data-driven in nature. But they're also asking us to come and present to our healthcare system board of directors, as well as to our senior executive meetings, and not just tell them about the great work we're doing, but educate them and help us to align back into our system-wide goals, all of which are positive signs of this cultural shift, this adoption of analytics into the fabric of how we work. And again, it's kind of what I started with. You can't rest on the laurels of your past successes. So we need to ensure we continue to drive value. One of my favorite ways that I like to think about this continuous development of value and are we really hitting the mark in terms of are we delivering what's needed within a space is that Gartner model of run, grow, and transform. So, and the Peter Drucker quote of what gets measured gets managed. I mean, if you really think about it, it's not just managed, but it's also enhanced and transformed. So when we think about this growth of the different assets that we're developing, it's a matter of how can we continuously think about the roadmaps that we're developing within any given space to get there. The other aspect of what we've also done is in the last year, we worked with Gartner to use their DASOM model to build out our next 2 to 3 year strategy. And in that 2 to 3 year strategy refresh, we really dove into what are the areas that we need to focus on. And as a cohesive data and analytics leadership team, we've built out the understanding of the 3 areas that we are going to align to and dive into and build our next 2 to 3 year strategic goals around in terms of how we're going to further enable some of those spaces. And if you haven't done a strategy refresh recently, EDM has a great model as well. You can choose from these different models as long as you are continuously measuring and evaluating and growing your understanding of where the gaps are and where the opportunities are. I think that really helps you to keep enablement front and center and top of mind in terms of what it is that you're trying to grow and establish for your organization. And a couple of just quick parting thoughts before we wrap this up. You know, one of the things that I like to end a lot of presentations with when it comes to data and analytics is to never forget to communicate. I think it's one of those things where it's easy to let it fall to the wayside that you built something, you delivered something, but communication is often the thing that hangs us in the end if we're not doing it well. So really thinking about the communication plan at the beginning, early and often, communicating what it is that you're going to do, what are the goals that you're striving for, and then connecting that value back to what you've accomplished at the end and measuring that success in a way that value is front and center with your executives, with the staff, with the leaders, with the people in your community that you're really trying to shift that culture for. And that's how you continuously add back and fuel the value that you're providing back to the cultures that change that you're driving within an organization. And with that, I'm going to stop there. Hopefully you've gotten some good tips and tricks that will help you in your organization to be able to drive some cultural change based on enablement and adoption of data and analytics. I am going to stop my slides and I will let Derek take it from here.
Thanks, Rachini. Great coverage of some exciting stuff that you guys have been doing. And there's a lot of interest, by the way, in this. There's a bunch of questions. So I'm going to start firing away.
Please do.
I just, one of the key things is a real short and pointed question, which is curious to know the budget allocated for cultural transformation. Because it costs money.
Well, it does cost money. So I will tell you that after that survey, so one of the best things that happened was that it was a C-level executive that himself ran that analytics discovery. So once you get that C-level visibility, it helps to create this argument that we need to shuffle some things around. So was I given additional positions? No. But was I covered in maybe saying I'm going to reallocate some positions to be able to really invest back in the community? Yes. And I think that's what made a lot of the difference. So what I did in order to really make a true investment back into this space was to hire a community analytics manager. That was step one, right? So get somebody who it is their job to measure this success, to be able to think about the programs, and when I hired her, she's phenomenal by herself. Allison is one of those people who came to the table with a lot of great skills herself, but she also, on her first 30 days, probably talked to over 60 leaders across our health system just to further gather what they need in order to be there. So from a budget perspective, it wasn't that I got new people. It's that I had to look at my organization and say, if this is important, how am I going to reallocate some of the talent that I have to be able to do this? So I've got the manager, and she's got 2 other folks, and that's it, really, who who support the community, one of which is helping to develop training, the other who is doing some more of the programmatic aspects of it. And together, they've really, it's this community that kind of fuels itself, right? If you really think about when you enable a community, you have people who volunteer and raise their hands and want to help to drive more of it. So you're almost creating that coalition of the willing across the entire healthcare system of folks that are trying to help each other.
Very good, very good. What's the single most impactful change that you made to address culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think when it comes to culture, it's you said the quote that I tell people all the time, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast every single time. You know, so when it came to the cultural change for driving data and analytics through our organization, one of which is the manager position that we hired, right? So I don't want to downplay that at all. I think having somebody who focuses on people, who focuses on community is so critical. And even if it's a carve out of someone's job, but having it assigned, I think is one of the biggest thing, that somebody is looking out for that community. They're that voice, they're the corraller, they're the champion for it. I think that's one of the biggest things you can do when it comes to driving a cultural change, is having the ambassador that's responsible for really, you know, mobilizing that community to make those changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. Certainly from what I've seen and some of my own experiences, that's absolutely critical. And actually making it a deliberate thing that you're doing, as opposed to, oh, you just do it off the side of your desk and hope for the best. Because everything we're doing as leaders in data and analytics is, you know, fundamentally changing everything.
Everything.
In the organization. So it's like, okay, if you don't do this deliberately, it's not going to happen. Yeah, there's some interesting other questions that people came up on the same sort of theme in terms of, you know, formal methodologies and stuff. Like this one, for example, says there are certain intrinsic behaviors and values that one builds over time. Given the evolution and complexity of technology and choices evolving, what's a good approach for a high level and majorly covering cultural methodology that one can adopt? So a lot of words there, but at the end of the day, some kind of formal overarching methodology for cultural change. Did you guys have something like that? And did you adopt something like that from somewhere?
Yeah, so you know, I don't know if we 100%, you know, signed up for any one particular methodology for cultural change. I mean, you know, I think when it came to what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, one of the first things I think that I'll stand behind is I've got an amazing leadership team, right? I've got an amazing staff. So it's almost a matter of these people who work here, who understand this organization, they know it best. They know the people, they understand how things, what makes the organization tick. So gathering their needs, their ideas was a critical piece towards being aligned back to the culture of the organization. Because, you know, you can go out and find, and this is not a ding to anyone who's ever written a book or studied it, because I think we all leverage those to get some really amazing ideas. But it's what you do with it that's really the critical part, right? You can't necessarily follow a bunch of steps and it's going to work at every organization. So we went to a lot of conferences. We talked to a lot of leaders across the system. We went to conferences like this, right, where we could gather ideas and share and learn. But it's what we did with it that I think is the real magic, right? It's the what's going to work here, what's going to work for our organization that really connects back to the values and the ways that people work within our organization that we really highlighted. But you know, one thing I'll add to that is I think it's really important to think about the personas that you're trying to address through your cultural shift. It's never a one size fits all. I didn't really get into that with this particular discussion, but understanding that what you do for an executive layer is not the same that you're going to do at the analyst layer or the frontline staff level, right? That there are different personas that you're trying to build out the capabilities of enablement as well as that cultural shift for, and what are the different pathways that you are taking to trying to connect to those personas that also need to fit within the thinking of the cultural shift.
Yeah, great point. Well, here's another one. Enablement seems to be a big theme for this conference. How did you get buy-in for the needed resources?
Yeah. Enablement it's one of my favorite things. I mean, I had the luxury and the privilege of actually kicking off data governance at UNC Health, starting back in 2016. And one of the first things we talked about when we really got our arms around what were we going to do with this new program for governance was to actually say, we don't want to call it data governance anymore. We want to call it enablement. We want to call it data enablement. And we actually rebranded all of our data governance tool as Empower, because Empower felt like a closer word to what we were trying to do for the people in our organization. So when it comes to the budget and the resources and the support that we needed, it really was that connection to, and I can't stress it enough, in data governance, we call it compelling events, right? What was that one thing that finally connected all the way up through every layer of your organization that allowed you to get the buy-in for your program? In this presentation, I called it a crisis, right? I said they never waste a crisis. I think it was honestly, it was the crises that we were connecting to, that we connected it back to a purpose and a mission that allowed us to say, we're not just doing this for the sake of doing this. We're not doing this for data's sake. We weren't preaching about what data and analytics would do for folks. We were helping them to understand that you asked for this and we are here to deliver it. And these are the programs that we're going to build together, and bringing the community in to help us do that helped us to really secure some of the budget that we needed in order to make some of the investments back in tools and tech and even using our staff time for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then perhaps just a last question here. If you're providing data governance tools, why do you also need such a broad team chat group?
Yeah. I love tools, right? Tools are fun. It grounds us, allows us to have a common place to be working in. But there's a barrier to entry sometimes when folks feel like it's too hard to either get your information in or too hard to get it out. So our tech chat, which is what our Teams channel is, was an easy way for us to break down the silos. We'd have sometimes one analyst in one department all by their lonesome that was trying to hold up analytics for an entire group, and they felt like they were on an island. And so it was more than just the how do I get my questions answered. It was about helping you feel a connection to people, helping you feel like you've got your tribe, and adding that at the elbow support that something like a Teams channel allowed us to do. And it's been phenomenal for things like Friday afternoon jokes and building that community and feeling a purpose and being able to share some fun stories and help each other to grow our own skills and our thought process, and to get to know people across a really big system. When you're spread out geographically, we're not nearly as spread out as some big companies, but it's one of those things where the Teams channel brings people together. The data governance tools, as we evolve them and get better at them, we're going to figure out a way to integrate that also back through things like our Teams channel, so it becomes an easier one-stop shop to get your answers. But the Teams channel has other purposes than just to answer questions on data and analytics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tremendously unifying type of a thing, and kind of creates that sense of team, as you say. Interesting. Well, Rachini, you've given us a lot to think about, and you guys have done some amazing work there. So congrats on that. And thanks for sharing it with our community here at CDOIQ. So I think with that, I just wish you all the best for continued success. And once again, huge thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you everybody who joined.